Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, I want to talk a little bit about how to address your fitness and wellness if you're living with a disability. I think it's very important to address everyone who may be listening to this podcast, and I want this podcast to really be representative of all of our potential listeners. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how disability, physical activity, poverty, and your diet can affect your mood from the lens of having a disability and living with that daily. So first up, we're going to talk about food and our moods, so nutrition as it relates to mental health. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary Super Size Me, but I watched it several years back when I was in Fit and Well for Life class, I believe, and in that movie, I was going to say the main character, but really it's a documentary, so the person who is the main person going through everything is named Morgan Spurlock, and Morgan is trying to eat only McDonald's food, nothing but McDonald's food 3 times a day for an entire month in order to really feel the connection between obesity and increased intake of fast food. So this is kind of just an extreme first-person study that he conducted. He doesn't even drink water unless it comes from McDonald's during this whole 30 days. And anytime he's asked if he wants to supersize a meal, he has to say yes. So kind of like Jim Carrey and Yes Man, but strictly for supersizing McDonald's food. So what happens to Morgan over these 30 days is that the diet starts to wreak havoc on his physical health. It causes problems with his LDL, those bad cholesterols. It spikes those. He has a lot of weight gain. He has a lot of high blood pressure from all of the sodium that's in all of this food. And it also affects his mental health. So by, about 15 days in, Morgan starts having headaches a lot. And he says he's never been so depressed in his entire life. His energy level was also really depleted by what he was putting into his body. So, in that manner, how food is taken into our bodies really does matter, and we need to be mindful of how it can make us feel after eating it. Y'all know I love a McDonald's cheeseburger as much as the next guy, but I just cannot eat it every day. My body revolted on me this last week because I was just eating a cheese and pepperoni sandwich on honey wheat bread with a little bit of truffle salt every day as I was just swamped with work, and my body definitely felt it. All of the work and all of the poor dieting really caught up to me. And remember, serotonin is manufactured in our guts. So I was not doing my gut bacteria any favors by not feeding it any high fiber foods, really. So honey wheat is largely still processed and it has a lot of sugar in it. And so yesterday I was really sad. My body was not happy with what I'd been feeding it. It was not pleased with where I was taking it with my depression, even though I am on Prozac for that. So in that way, I had to address what was going on with my body. I was too tired, and my body did not have the fuel from sleep or from appropriate nutrients to really do what it needed to do. So since serotonin's manufactured in the gut, I went ahead and made myself a salad last night with a bunch of broccoli on it. And since I was exhausted, I rescheduled a 9 p.m. meeting for sometime today and went ahead and went to sleep at 8 p.m. It was one of the best things I could have done for myself. I felt bad rescheduling the meeting, but I was open about it being a poor mental health day and went ahead and asked for the rescheduling. And you know what? My coworker was very understanding about it, and everything is fine. We're not behind on the deadline or anything. So ask for it if you need it. I also feel a lot better today. I am not feeling depressed like I was yesterday. I don't know how quickly that gut bacteria works. I'm going to have to look that up for you guys. But eating that high fiber diet with, a large salad and broccoli and everything, it just made me feel better all around, I think. It could just be in my head, but hey, the placebo effect is real. So in that regard, I want to talk about how we're going to eat food for our physical and our mental health. Depression is very common in our society. I think I'm talking to most of y'all in the United States. And it is sometimes strongly correlated with people who have chronic health conditions or disabilities and who face these unique challenges in everyday life that can place you at an increased risk. It is a serious illness. We often think of serious illnesses as being merely physically debilitating, but depression can also be very much mentally debilitating. If you are not in a good frame of mind, you may not be likely to take your medication as you need to, or to do your physical therapy that you need to do. So we want to address that, and one of the ways is through good nutrition. Now, I'm not at all saying that this is going to solve all of our problems. It's not. Each of us have individual issues that we have to face in our own lives, and as I've said before, just somebody telling you to work out or to eat better is not going to fix your problems. That's just not how reality works, and it feels demeaning when somebody tells us that. So my perspective on this is that we're just giving our bodies the best shots we possibly can by taking these little steps. And the little steps don't even have to be going and eating proper nutrition right now or enhancing your nutrition. It is a step in and of itself that you are listening to this podcast right now. And I am proud of you. So, good nutrition, it is an important component for improving our moods and can increase our sense of well-being, but we should not be using it as a substitute for medical care. Now, how does this work in your brain, though? So you eat this food, and the chemicals in our brain interact with that throughout the day. It's important to eat a healthy variety of foods because they each have different effects on our brain. So carbs, like high fiber foods, like, the broccoli and the salad that I have, those increase serotonin. Your brain loves that because it helps calm you down. So yesterday when I was having a bummer of a day, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to force feed myself the salad. I know I'm not really hungry at all, but that's probably because I'm depressed, and the serotonin might help me, even if the Prozac isn't carrying its weight today. Sometimes people crave, really high carb foods when you're under a lot of stress. We've talked about that in a previous podcast where your body doesn't understand what the stressor is. So it can't tell that you don't need more energy per se. It just knows that you're stressed and it's preparing you for a fight, flight, and fleeing. So it's just going, hey, give us all those nutrients. We're going to need those for fighting the stress that you're under right now. And people, regardless of how healthy their diets are and how much they regularly eat, tend to eat more junky foods when they're stressed out. That's just what the studies have found. So that's how carb-rich foods work. Protein-rich foods increase norepinephrine, dopamine, tyrosine, some other neurotransmitters that help us feel good and, increase our alertness. If you're feeling sleepy all the time, maybe eat some meat. I did that earlier, and I feel better. I had a fried egg sandwich. So not the most healthy, but really it's just like scrambled eggs that I put on bread. So it's not that bad. I only used a little butter. Poor nutrition and lack of a variety of healthy foods, though, can make our depression worse by limiting the availability of those specific nutrients it needs. Nutrient deficiencies are generally pretty rare, but as I've told you guys before, I have one, vitamin D3. So yesterday, went out and sat in the sun again. Helped me feel a lot better. Our thiamine, which is vitamin B1, is found in legumes, seeds, fortified grains, etc. And those are really helpful and necessary for maintaining our energy stores and helping our muscles and nerves coordinate their activity. Thiamine deficiency can lead to weakness, irritability, and depression. And folates, which is your vitamin B9, those are found in like leafy greens, legumes, fortified grains, etc. They're important for supporting your red blood cell production. That's going to help your nerves function properly as well. If you have a folate deficiency, then that can result in depression, apathy, fatigue, poor sleep, poor concentration. So all of those together mostly just sound like depression to me. And regardless of which one in particular you're feeling more of the symptoms of, we want to set ourselves up for success. So make sure that you talk with your doctor about, what to maybe add to your diet. You may need a nutritionist or a dietitian to give you a really good food recommendation, but if you are on medication to treat any type of illness, then you should speak with your doctor first before taking any vitamins or supplements. Some vitamins and supplements can prevent your medication from acting properly. I was on a calcium medication for a while, and my doctor told me, hey, you need to take this like 2 hours before or 2 hours after your birth control because it can render it ineffective by not allowing your body to take up the hormones in the birth control like you really need it to in order to work properly. And I was like, yikes, I never would have thought that calcium supplements could cause that big of a problem. Turns out it can. Same thing happens with probiotics. If you take probiotics while you're on antibiotics, you need to take it a couple hours before or a couple hours after you take the antibiotics. Otherwise, it just kind of cancels the probiotics out and they don't have a chance to colonize in your gut. Pro tip, I learned that this last year. Now, research studies don't really support taking large amounts of vitamin supplements to prevent or treat depression. Make sure you talk to your doctor and then just eat a wide variety of healthy foods. Lean proteins, whole grains, fruits, veggies. Remember those healthy fats we talked about when we went over oils this last week on labels, oils, eggs, and meat. Also low-fat dairy products. So remember those are going to help you obtain the nutrients you need to support a healthy mind and body. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more specifically about depression and the timing of when we eat.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Eating for our mood. So food for our moods and how that can help with mental health. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about depression specifically and how the timing of when we eat can impact how we feel. I don't know about you guys, but I generally follow an intermittent fasting diet, not because it's a diet per se, but because that's naturally how my body tends to want to eat. And I just kind of fell into it, and then someone's like, oh, you intermittent fast. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I had to look into it a few years back. Turns out it's a diet. So my body naturally wants to eat at certain times of the day and only for about an 8-hour window. So I do the 16-8 one where I fast for 16 hours and then I eat for an 8-hour period, generally about 11 to 7 a.m. to p.m. each day. However, a lot of times the low energy levels that we feel throughout the day are a result of poor meal timing. So it's important to listen to our bodies when we're trying to decide when to eat. It's not just when are we hungry, but also how do we feel? Are we tired? Are we sad? What's going on with us individually to make us feel these different types of ways that maybe we can actually eat for them. So I know we think of eating as something that we tend to abstain from for our health. So we abstain from certain types of carbs, but in this case, you can eat to improve your health as well. So instead of skipping meals, you want to really pay attention to the amount of time in between your meals. The best way to fuel your body is to space your meals and your snacks about 3 to 4 hours apart, depending on any different types of illnesses that you have. That's going to be different if you have diabetes versus just depression versus any other type of issues. Fibromyalgia, that's going to affect your diet as well. But, for example, eating patterns that involve skipping meals can contribute to mood swings by causing blood sugar fluctuations. So we want to be careful with that. We don't want our glucose levels to go too wild. Remember, that can contribute to type 2 diabetes risk, and it can also just cause mood swings in general, which are not fun and can ruin your day. Food restriction can lead to binge eating as well. We don't want to do that either. It can also magnify your emotional responses, give you trouble in concentrating, increase your stress, and just give you an overall lower sense of wellness. So we want to choose a healthy protein and a healthy carb source at each meal and to space those out by about 3 or 4 hours. Next time you eat, I want you to pay attention to how you feel afterwards. Maybe you'll notice you're in a better mood and have more energy after eating a healthy meal. I tend to feel healthiest when I eat sushi. Now, granted, that is not sustainable as a diet for me because I live in the United States and that would cost me a lot of money in order to do that. I've thought about trying to make it myself, but even when I went to Whole Foods, it's crazy how expensive sushi grade salmon can be. So I can't eat that every day, even if that is what my body feels best like doing. But when I do choose to go out, I can choose going to get sushi instead of or poke. I love poke. Instead of going to like Red Lobster or going to a fast food place. We want to kind of keep in mind how we feel about these things. You can keep a food diary if you want. I don't keep one. Generally, I just go, hey, how do I feel right now? Okay, let's see if, eating something else is going to make me feel better. Kind of like when you have a headache and you're like, is it my ponytail? Is it from dehydration? Do I need more caffeine? Less caffeine? More sodium? Do I need real food because I'm not maintaining my electrolytes and vitamins and minerals properly? Have I even eaten today? So we want to ask ourselves these questions as we go along to make sure that our bodies are getting the best head start they can in keeping an eye on our wellness. So with depression, a lot of people have trouble talking about it. We tend to stigmatize mental health disorders in the United States, and it feels vulnerable to open up to other people about what's going on in your life. When you're also depressed, and particularly if you are depressed and are dealing with anxiety, it can be really hard to cancel plans with a friend or a coworker because you feel like you're giving someone an excuse rather than just being forthright with your explanation. It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to tell people. Now, I say that as a person who a year ago I would not have admitted to any of that. I would not have admitted to any personal struggles that I was dealing with at the time to anyone. I'm a very private person in general, but this is something that I think is very important for us to be open with and talk about, especially since about 16 million adults have had at least one major depressive episode since 2012. And by that, I mean it qualifies as a full-blown depression according to the qualifying criteria in the DSM-4 and 5. Now we're on 5. This is back from 2012, so they were just in the middle of swapping over at that time. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that there are just several different factors that contribute to getting depressed, including your genetics, the biology and chemistry of our individual brains, and different life experiences, particularly trauma, like losing a loved one, difficult relationships, or even abuse, violence, and acts of war. So it is really on a huge spectrum as to who could be affected by this. With PTSD, we tend to think of it as being strictly related to the military because that's how PTSD is generally portrayed on TV shows like Grey's Anatomy. Owen has PTSD. He was also in the war. They don't really go into it with a lot of the characters in these TV shows who are not military. But any type of trauma really can result in PTSD. We'll talk about PTSD in more depth in another segment, in a different show, but today we're going to dial this back to symptoms of depression. So if you're wondering if you may be depressed or if you're just sad, depression means that the sadness is not your only symptom. It's not just sadness and gloom. And in fact, a lot of people who suffer from depression don't even feel sad. The National Institute of Mental Health has several signs and symptoms of depression on their website, listed as difficulty concentrating, making decisions, or remembering things. If you have poor sleep patterns, including waking up very early or oversleeping, depression can result in either oversleeping or undersleeping. I have insomnia as well, and that is likely a result of my depression. And sometimes that happens. You can talk to your doctor about it and see if they can find a medication that may work for you, or you may be able to address part of that with your diet or changing your routine. I'm really bad to stay up at night, surfing Instagram, in bed. I should not have my phone in bed. That's something I'm working on for myself. So, we just need to keep an eye on ourselves and maybe try some new habits and routines. We can also have symptoms of depression related to changes in appetite or our weights, if we're frequently thinking about death or suicide or even attempting suicide. Granted, that can be more difficult to suss out if you work in a death investigator type role. So I went to school for forensic anthropology. I think about death a lot. For me, that's not really correlated with my symptoms of depression. That is just part of what I choose to focus on for my life. And that's a day-to-day lifestyle choice. Now, if it starts getting to the point where you're thinking about your own death or suicide, then that you really might want to go talk to a doctor at that point, even if you are in more of a death investigator role or a death worker in general. It's always nice to go and talk to somebody when you just need to get it out. And even psychologists frequently go and see other psychologists. If you are restless and frequently irritable, then that may also be from depression. You might not be grumpy just because you're upset about something. Even if you are fully valid and justified in being upset about such a thing, it's important to ask ourselves if the degree to which we are upset is really warranted. I was a really irritable person last year, and that was not fun for me, and I'm sure it was not fun for my friends, but they were very patient with me, and they gave me the space to recognize that and to work through it, and that was very critical. So if you aren't suffering from depression, but you have a friend who is, or both. You have it and you know a friend who's having difficulty with it. Try to keep that in mind as well, that when they're displaying these bouts of irritability, it could be coming from a place of depression rather than just them being angry or upset. We tend to judge ourselves on our intentions and others by our perceptions of them. And it's very important, I think, to really try to flip that around and think about what makes me act like that when I am in that situation. Okay, they might have a lot more going on. I get snappy when I am stressed out. Maybe they're stressed about something. Maybe I can help them out with that. If you're also feeling pessimistic or hopeless, if you're feeling constantly anxious or just empty, if you are feeling guilty a lot, if you're running these scenarios over in your head of something that you messed up on 10 years ago, as we are wont to do when you have anxiety and depression, then you might want to talk to your doctor about that. If your meds are not fully addressing what's going on with you right now, they may be able to find another alternative for you. If you have lower energy levels, or you feel fatigued or slowed down, or you're having changes to your appetite or weight, or you're losing interest in your hobbies and activities that you used to enjoy, go ahead and talk to a doctor. I'm going to go next week and talk to my doctor about my medication, and I encourage each of you to go as well if you are having these types of issues. A lot of people suffering from depression don't seek help because of the stigma associated with it. I encourage you guys to go. I put it off for a very long time, and now that I have started addressing it this past year, it has helped me a lot. I like to also make appointments with a buddy sometimes, so we'll make back-to-back doctor's appointments if it's something that stresses us both out. And two of my friends now also go to my doctor because she is fantastic, and they drive 45 minutes down to go and see her. I have to drive 45 minutes to go see her too because I moved to a different town. Could take me more than an hour depending on what time of day I make my appointment. It just really depends. But I try to set myself up for success by picking afternoon appointments. That way I know that I will be up even if I'm having trouble with the insomnia and sleeping. And I make sure I let one of my friends know that I'm going to be doing that day so that I can talk to them about it and I can follow up with them. And they can go, hey, did you go to your appointment? It's really helpful for me to do it this way. And I am glad to encourage you guys and to be your depression buddy as well. You are welcome to reach out to me at the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast on Twitter. So reach out to our account there, and I'm glad to talk about these things with you guys. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not here to give medical advice, just general education and info purposes. All right, we're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how poverty affects disability and health.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Segment, we were talking about depression, including symptoms of it, and why people tend to not go seek treatment for it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about poverty, disability, and health, and how they're related to each other. So folks with disabilities are often a demographic that experiences poverty at a disproportionate rate compared to their peers who don't have disabilities. They've done several population surveys over the years, and they have always consistently shown that nearly 1/3 of people living with disabilities are also living below the poverty line, and they are more than twice as likely to live in poverty when compared to non-disabled peers. Medication costs a lot of money, and that is one huge factor in that. This past week, Governor Pritzker of Illinois signed a bill, SB 667, into law, capping the out-of-pocket costs for insulin at $100 total for a 30-day supply. He said that this is an important step for lowering healthcare costs for 1.3 million Illinois residents who rely on insulin. To put that into perspective, Illinois has a population of less than 13 million. So 10% of people in Illinois have diabetes or another type of medical issue that requires insulin in order to treat it. I agree with him. This is a really important step for lowering those healthcare costs. A lot of people who have disabilities and chronic illnesses have to make a choice sometimes about purchasing the medication that they need in order to survive, or choosing their basic necessities, keeping the lights on and stuff like that. My family faced similar issues when I was growing up in Appalachia, and it can indeed be a very difficult choice to make because you're looking at one person with a disability versus the greater good of the family in some cases, and that makes it really hard to make those decisions, especially depending on which person in the family it is who is having the medical issues, whether they be physical or mental in nature. So that's a really difficult choice for a lot of people to make, and I think it's terrible that a lot of people are put into that position. So bills such as this one, SB 667, as signed in by Governor Pritzker last week, are very helpful in that regard. However, since they're only at the state level, this disproportionately affects a lot of people who are not in that state. And we can't all just up and move to a state. I hear people say that a lot, particularly to my friends who have issues such as epilepsy, and they're like, oh, why don't you just move to Colorado or move to California? Do you know the difference between the cost of living over there versus where we are now? It's a lot different. And chances are, if you can't afford your medication each month, you're not going to be able to afford the costs of moving. There's a lot that goes into that. A lot of people also live with their families or near their families to have help with their care, whether that's the care of the individual or child care, because that is really expensive too. So remember, we approach everything from a holistic perspective here, and this is no different. Having a disability, dealing with mental illnesses is a holistic issue, and poverty can play a large role in that. To that end, it has also been well established that experiencing a disability can be a cause or a consequence of poverty. It can be both. And if you have a disability that can lead to a loss of employment, that means a reduction in income, because not everyone who has a disability is eligible for full disability benefits. That's not how it works. Then, if you have a significant increase in healthcare costs that accompanies that, like your insulin is not as affordable as it is in Illinois, then that can cause further financial distress. That means that many folks in our country are having difficulty digging themselves out of these holes that they didn't dig to begin with. You can't stop mental illness or physical illness from taking you over. It's really difficult to even treat it if you are already impoverished. So it's like digging a hole that you fell into with a spoon, but the hole is already 20 feet deep, so anything that you dig is just going right back on the ground. Poverty can also foster living conditions that can lead to health issues, or that just don't promote a lot of health opportunities. A lot of times this is associated with food insecurity. We've spoken a bit before about food deserts, but food insecurity is a little bit different. It can be characterized in one of two ways, either moderate or high. Moderate food insecurity is characterized by reduced quality, desirability, and variety of your diet with no indicators of reduced food intake. And high food insecurity is characterized by the same features as moderate, but with also disrupted eating patterns and significantly reduced food intake. So in both of those situations, if one or more adult of working age in the home has a disability, then they are 50% more likely, the household that is, to fall into that high food security. That means there's a reduction in food intake as well as food quality. When that happens, particularly if you have reduced your intake of nutritious food, that can make a lot of health problems worse. The USDA has noted that while many people with disabilities are enrolled in assistance programs like SNAP or food stamps, that often does not make up enough to offset the expenses that they have with their medication. Because again, not everyone qualifies for these social benefits, even if they really do have serious medical issues. And a lot of it, if your medication is super expensive, then you're not going to be able to really afford everything else that goes into living a sustainable lifestyle. Poverty and health can really be a big problem for many people in America, but particularly when you have disabilities, you have an increased barrier in trying to access healthcare. So buildings that are inaccessible, if you have inaccessible diagnostic equipment such as scales, if you are in a wheelchair, getting onto those scales at the doctor's office that are step-on scales is a problem in a lot of cases. We need to be thinking more about how to improve the quality of life for everyone around us. And that's everyone from doctors to just the general population. Just think about it in your daily life. What can I do to make this easier for someone? The exam tables can also be problematic in that same way, so can scanning machines. The National Disability Institute found that people with disabilities are almost twice as likely, 46% versus 25% of people without disabilities, to skip a medical appointment because of cost. If you can't make it to your medical appointment, you can't re-up your medication anyway. That's a big problem. Also, people with disabilities often report lack of accessible transportation as another barrier to accessing healthcare and community services that are available. So even if they are available in your area, a lot of people can't actually access them. In order to address poverty and these healthcare issues, it's really going to need policy solutions and anti-poverty efforts at the national, state, and local levels. But January is Poverty Awareness Month, which is why I'm talking about this as well right now. And that provides an opportunity for certain initiatives that focus on housing issues, employment nutrition, and health promotion or health care for people in poverty to develop an increased focus on inclusion. So I hope that you guys have learned some stuff today in that regard, because these initiatives can help develop partnerships with disability organizations to increase focus on inclusion through promoting accessible environments and awareness of strategies to include people with disabilities in different contexts. If you are disabled, I hope that this is helpful today. And if you are not disabled, I don't know what each of you guys do for a living. And hopefully I've reached someone today who is thinking more about diversity and inclusion now. And maybe you can come up with some solutions to prevent these barriers to access in health and wellness. We're going to go on another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about mindful versus mindless eating.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about how January is Poverty Awareness Month and how that disproportionately affects people who are disabled. Now we're going to talk about mindful versus mindless eating. So we talked about mindfulness quite a bit here and how sometimes when we think that we're hungry, we're actually just kind of bored. So I've taken to start drinking tea instead. I have several types of tea in the kitchen. Yesterday was rose tea. Today I have been drinking sencha. I'm not a big matcha fan, but sencha is another kind of green tea. And my favorite, which I'm out of, is Dragon Ball Jasmine. So they're these little pearls that are made up of tea leaves, but they're tightly wound. And when you put them into your cup, you put about 9 of them in there in like a mug, fill it up with water, and then they start unfurling themselves, and they are gorgeous. It's fun to watch as well as to drink, and it smells amazing. So those are my go-tos. And whenever I find myself wanting to munch on a snack in front of the television, then I'll go ahead and get a cup of unsweetened tea like that first, and then go from there. If I'm still hungry after the tea, then I'll go ahead and eat something. So, is your mind full? Are you being mindful and in the present when you are eating? Are you aware that you're really eating that much? Or is it just, some mindless snacking like we used to do in high school? I would snack on pretzels all day. And me and my sister and our friend Robin could each go through a bag of pretzels in a single sleepover period. It was crazy how much we were eating. Granted, we were teenagers. We were all right. But, just eating straight pretzels, not our best choice. So keeping an eye on how hungry you're actually feeling, or whether you're eating out of boredom or just for something to do, can help you eliminate some, mindless eating habits that can cause overconsumption and are just a result of us not really thinking about it. So what is mindless eating? So that's the type of eating that we do anytime the brain's distracted and we're not really paying attention to what or how much food we're consuming. There are 5 factors that contribute to that. The first is disinhibition, and that means eating when you're not hungry, like when you're bored or food's just giving you something to do. There's also distracted eating, so that occurs when your mind is sidetracked, whether that's by television or by conversations, or any other type of distractions. A lack of awareness. So it's really easy not to notice how much food you're eating when you're eating directly out of a bag or you're not measuring your portion sizes. So I try not to eat out of the ice cream carton or directly out of the bag of cookies. I'll go ahead and grab a couple of cookies and put them on a plate and then sit down with them. And that helps me address that lack of awareness. Otherwise, I would eat an entire box of those Belgian chocolate cookies from Trader Joe's in a single sitting every day. Emotional eating also leads to a lot of mindless eating. So when we're emotional, that can make a big impact on what we're eating and whether we care about what we're eating, especially with a lot of individuals turning to food as a source of comfort when you're sad. My favorites are cheese, like Camembert, which are very fatty, and also, like mashed potatoes. I love loaded mashed potatoes, and I will eat a bunch of them if I don't pay attention and put them on my plate in an individual regular size portion and also pay attention to my emotions and not just eat 3 bowls of mashed potatoes when I'm sad. For our final one for mindless eating, we have external reasons. So it's like if you see a food ad or TV commercials, they contribute to mindless eating sometimes. It's the power of suggestion. So if you see a billboard with a picture of some pizza on it and you're suddenly craving pizza and you're like, man, I'm going to go by the pizza place on my way home. That is part of mindless eating as well. You've been externally affected or influenced into getting some more junk. Now, mindful eating, on the other hand, is just being aware of your own physical, cognitive, and emotional state in the moment, as well as any external environmental impacts. So like the billboards and stuff. And you want to pay attention to what you're doing in the moment, but without any judgment. We're going to let those emotions and judgments pass through us, just recognizing them for what they are, without beating ourselves up about it, and then just being mindful about what we're going to eat. We're being mindful of the type of food we're eating, how much, and really just experience in the moment the flavor of your food. If you savor your food, it's going to take you longer to finish it, and it's going to take longer for those chemicals in your body to tell your brain that you're full. Now, for tips for mindful eating, what can we do to be more mindful about it? The first one is slow down. It takes up to 20 minutes for your body to realize it's feeling full. So if we slow down and enjoy our food, then we're going to consume less food in that same time period. So you are eating less, but your brain's still like, yes, I'm full. Because it's really, fullness is not entirely about how much you eat. It's about how long it takes you as well. Think about where your food comes from while you're eating it. That's a good way to maintain mindfulness. Now, I know that might not be everyone's bag, and that's totally okay. But if you are into that, then think about how your vegetables grew from the ground, or how the grapes were picked from the vine for your glass of red wine that you're having for heart-healthy reasons. Think about creating a healthy eating environment for yourself. Don't roam the cabinets. Try to eliminate any distractions or unhealthy foods sitting on your countertop. If you are going to keep unhealthy foods in the house, maybe put them in the cabinet and keep the fruit out on the countertop. Personally, I have a rule where I don't bring chips into my house and I don't bring sodas into my house unless I'm having a party. That's the only time. It's for my guests. But I can't bring them in the house for myself. I will still bring in cookies, but I've moved to those Belgian dark chocolate cookies instead of just eating Oreos. So I'm dialing it back a little bit, just like my step-down program for sodas, and just being more mindful about what's going on. If I do have juice, I water it down. It's a 50-50 juice to water ratio. And you can do that in a step down too, where your body gets used to having fewer and fewer sugars. But now if I want something sweet and I don't have any fruit out, then I can drink a little bit of juice and it's okay. But I try to make sure that it is 100% juice and it doesn't have a lot of added sugar. So those mindful actions take place not just when we're consuming food, but also when we're selecting it at the grocery store and even selecting it from our own pantries. I also want you to think about how you're feeling when you're eating. So people tend to feed their feelings for comfort. I do it, and my cat has picked up on that habit. I have seen her angry eat, and I've seen her sad eat, and even fear eat once. That was really weird. But your animals pick up on your habits as well. So if you're starting to notice that your pets are maybe overeating, and their habits have changed, then it may have something to do with you as well. And it's important to kind of hold that mirror up and say, hey, wait, what's going on here? Am I doing the same thing? Are they picking that up from me? And make sure that you're asking yourself, am I eating because I'm hungry or because I'm sad, excited, or nervous? You can also eliminate distractions by turning off the TV, placing your mobile device in another room. That way we're not acting out that distracted eating that was part of mindless eating. You can use a food diary, as I mentioned earlier, where you can write down everything you're eating or drinking. You don't have to write down the calories or anything for that. I know a lot of people avoid food diaries because it's just a lot of work in some ways, having to find, calorie counters and your macros and everything. But you can record those in smartphone apps now or by pen and paper. You can record it onto your phone in an audible version, whatever best accommodates your needs, because it's not necessarily even about reviewing all of it. It's just helping to make you consciously aware of what you're consuming. That's all. Now, we did that in my Fit and Well for Life class, as I mentioned before, and it really made me aware of how much I was eating, where I wasn't eating a lot of food, but the food that I was eating was not nutritious. So really it was making me aware of the quality of my food more than anything, even before we started keeping track of how many calories and macros were in there. So use a food diary. You can keep it simple, and it can really help you out. Measure your food. So a lot of people tend to not like this idea because it's associated with, anorexia or binge eating. But if you're going for the correct portion sizes that are just meant to avoid overeating, then it can be okay. If you do struggle with issues related to body image, I would recommend against this one, and you should talk to your doctor about maybe finding something that works better for you so that you aren't fixating on how much you're eating. Lastly, pay attention to your hunger cues. You can use the hunger scale to determine if you're actually hungry or still satisfied from your previous meal. The hunger scale is 1 to 10, and you can find it online, and it goes from beyond hungry, very hungry, hungry, little hungry, neutral, all the way up to stuffed, bloated, and beyond full. If you're beyond full, that means you were miserable. Think Thanksgiving, and this year I practiced mindful eating at Thanksgiving as well, and everyone looked at me sideways, but I felt a lot better for doing it that way, and I still got to have leftovers the next day. It was fine, and it's really helped sustain my fitness journey. All right, we're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about ChooseMyPlate.gov and how to start simple with making tiny choices.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about mindful versus mindless eating, and now we're going to talk about ChooseMyPlate.gov. So this is a website that helps you pick out food for your food group targets. It's going to help you find out what works for you and your family within your own preferences, goals, and budget. Now, you can just go to ChooseMyPlate.gov to get started with My Plate, and it's ran by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a rundown on it first regarding some tips that you can use to start getting healthier now, even without the website. So for fruits, if we are going to eat fruits, as we've discussed before, juices aren't that great for us because they lack the fiber that we need to absorb the fructose that's in them. So we want to focus on whole fruits. The best way to do that is to start by eating seasonally. Seeing what fruits are in season in your area can help you save money, and hopefully they'll tend to be fresher. The average apple that's eaten in the U.S. is actually 10 months old because of how they freeze it and preserve it. So I think that's kind of wild, and it's not guaranteed to be super fresh unless you get it from like a farmer's market. But eating seasonally can help you save money, if nothing else. If you're craving something sweet, try some dried fruits. My ex loves mangoes. I'm not really into the dried mangoes. I'm more of a dried mandarin person or dried tangerines. But you can get apricots, cherries, cranberries, raisins, just whatever fruit really floats your boat in dried form. I like regular mango, just not dried mango. So you might not really end up liking one that is usually your go-to favorite when it is just regular whole fruit, but try a few out, see what you like. To help meet your fruit goal, go ahead and rinse your fresh fruit as soon as you bring it home from the store, and then keep it out where you can see it. That way, if you want a snack, you can just reach out and grab a piece. For vegetables, you'll want to vary your vegetables. I get really tired of eating the same thing over and over again a lot. I did that a lot growing up, and now as an adult, I just don't want to see the same thing over and over again. Now, I say that having eaten the exact same sandwich for like 4 days in a row this past week, but I digress. One way to help you get more veggies in your diet, though, is by adding a different one to your meals each day. Keep in mind that you might want to add color to it. That's going to give you different types of nutrients. So red cabbage instead of just green cabbage or Napa cabbage. Use baby carrots. They say to use green beans as well. I'm not sure how that's supposed to add color for most salads, since green beans are green by nature for most of them, and so is your salad. But if you are eating a salad that is based on red cabbage, then those green beans are really going to pop. So include those seasonal veggies just like you would those seasonal fruits to help get you some vegetables that are both less expensive and newer. Fresher, really. I don't know why I said newer. They've always been vegetables, but they're fresher. Vegetables also go well with a dip or dressing. So yesterday when I had that raw broccoli and that salad, I put my favorite dressing on it, which is a champagne pear gorgonzola dressing. We get it at Trader Joe's, and it is so delicious. It's only 60 calories per 2 tablespoons of it, I believe. So you don't actually need to use a lot. It's very flavorful. It almost has kind of a cinnamony component as well, which is interesting and unexpected, but also delicious. So I recommend getting something like that. Trying to stay closer to a vinaigrette will generally help rather than going straight for like a ranch. You could also try hummus or a low-fat dip with some raw broccoli. I don't really like to put peppers into my hummus, but I do like to use cucumbers, and I understand why people like the peppers. They're just not for me. You can use snap peas in there. Snap peas are one of my favorite foods. They are so good in whatever you put them in. They can take on the flavor of whatever you cook them with, and they are great just for snacking on their own, even without the hummus. But you can also use celery, cherry tomatoes, cauliflower, etc. for those vegetables. Now with my cauliflower, I like to roast it in the oven for, I think it's like 40 minutes or so, just to go ahead and get it nice and brown on the top and soft on the inside, but not too soft, because I will also make a whipped goat cheese with it as a spread. And the whipped goat cheese isn't a ton of heavy whipping cream or anything in there, but it's just enough to really give it a whipped texture so that it's spreadable. And I just do that with my blender in the kitchen, and it's so delicious. I highly recommend it, and I know that it's not necessarily incredibly low fat. You can get low fat types of cheese, and also just budget out your cheese for the day, or your fat for the day really, so you can enjoy that delicious cheese, and it makes cauliflower go down so much easier. For your grains, make sure that half of the grains that you eat are whole grains. So when I eat whole grains, I tend to do frosted shredded wheat. Sure, it has a little bit of added sugar, but as long as I'm being attentive and mindful of how much overall sugar I'm intaking, then it's not so bad. I don't add any extra sugar to my cereal, and I go ahead and get my milk from that, as I don't really like dairy that much. But I also don't like milk substitutes, as we talked about last time. So for me, this is my happy medium. Popcorn is also a whole grain. Now, if you have a lot of butter on it, then your calorie to whole grain ratio is going to be a little bit wonky, and it might not be exactly what you're going for. Or maybe popcorn is your savory treat for the evening. That's totally up to you. But if you want, they are types of low-fat or fat-free popcorns for healthier snacks. I think Skinny Girl is actually pretty delicious. I have some of that in my house. My old roommate used to use that, and I was like, hey, this is actually not bad. I'm not much one for diet food, per se, but this is delicious. You can also put whole grain pastas in baked dishes or pasta salads, something that's heavy with a sauce. So if you're not big into whole grain pastas, you can kind of hide it and trick yourself into eating it like our parents did to us when we were kids. You can also still choose refined grain pasta if that's what you prefer and you just can't get behind whole grain pasta. Just make sure it's enriched by checking the ingredient list. You can also get certain types of pasta that are veggie-based. That's my favorite way to do it. So they're partly flour, but mostly veggie, or 50-50 in a lot of cases. And some of them can actually be pretty inexpensive and quite tasty without, having any different textures in it, really, like whole grain pasta sometimes can. Now, you can also have ready-to-eat whole grain cereal as a breakfast option or as a snack. I like to do that with Cheerios. I don't really need any sugar added to my Cheerios. Sometimes if I eat them with sugar, I will go ahead and put some cut up strawberries or something in there. But I often eat Cheerios just dry. My friend Marie will eat Frosted Mini Wheats dry. I don't know how she does it. I'm not capable of doing that one because it just leaves my mouth so incredibly dry and I need milk for that one. But Cheerios is my go-to for just plain old dry cereal snacking. It's good for your cholesterol as well. For proteins, we want to vary our protein routines as well. You want to make dinner once, serve it twice, so you have an extra amount of food. That's going to save us time and effort, but it's also going to, be tasty. It's efficient. I'm a huge fan of efficiency. So you can roast a larger cut of lean meat and use the leftover meat the next day for lunch or for dinner, whatever you really prefer. I like to sometimes make chicken. I'll bake chicken and do it 2 different ways. I'll just season one set of 6 one way and another set of 6 the other, and then use certain ones for like salads that I like to put baked chicken on, and I'll eat the other ones just with yams and green beans, stuff like that. For car trips, it's always good to pack a mix of unsalted nuts, seeds, and dried fruit for a crunchy protein snack. I understand a lot of people don't like unsalted nuts though, and that is totally fair. I like sunflower seeds in that regard. If I'm going to do salted nuts or unsalted nuts, then I go with generally peanuts or cashews, but I do like mine lightly salted. And I like frozen or dried blueberries in it and dark chocolate chips. So that one is particularly delicious with the dark chocolate chips, the blueberries, and the salted nuts. You can also throw some sunflower seeds in there. And it's super healthy for you. Remember, dark chocolate is our friend. We don't want to necessarily overindulge, but when you have other sweet, delicious things in there like the blueberries and you have other excellent textures in there like the nuts and the seeds that are also flavorful, then it makes it a much more sustainable snack. That's my favorite go-to trail mix for hiking as well. If you're going to be eating a lot of different types of protein and you like seafood, try to keep some seafood on hand. I keep canned tuna in the house in water, not the oil kind. And if I am making a sandwich because I just need to really eat something in the moment, I'll put a little bit of relish in there, sweet relish, and I'll also boil an egg or 2 and put that in it. So it's a super protein snack, has a little bit of vegetables in there, and then I can go ahead and eat that on a sandwich with just a little bit of mayonnaise meant to hold it together, not a ton. You can also do crab or frozen fish. We like to do mahi-mahi in this house and ahi tuna steaks and also swordfish steaks. You can find them frozen in the frozen food sections of grocery stores and just keep them in there for when you need a quick meal. They actually defrost really easily and they're generally individually wrapped. Now, I feel one type of way about that because of the environment. On the other hand, when you're going to get food at the moment, it can be really nifty. And regardless of how we buy fish, it tends to always come in plastic. People look at you sideways if you try to bring your own glass containers into the deli section of the grocery store. Just saying. Depends on how you feel about that and how your deli feels about it. For dairy, try to, maybe do low-fat or fat-free milk or yogurt if your diet is otherwise high in fat. Now remember, we do need fat in our diet for helping us process vitamins and such. So we need to still be getting some fat. So if you're having a total fat-free diet, you're going to need to add some fat in there somewhere, either with like some healthy oils like avocado oil or walnut oil, or with, a dairy product. So make a smoothie by putting in some milk and some yogurt. Sometimes I use ice cream. I don't eat a lot of fat otherwise, so it's okay for me. And then add in some fresh or frozen fruit to that. I tend to get large bags of frozen fruit from the grocery store, and then I will add in protein powder, a little bit of ice, and some ice cream just to give it, a kind of more of a creamy texture and help blend in all of that protein powder. And that really helps me get flavor, texture, and nutrients all in one. If you are really into texture for your yogurt and such, go ahead and throw in some cereal. Put some granola in there and see how you feel about that flavor. Now just make sure that you probably want to eat that with a spoon rather than a straw in a lot of cases, so you don't, swallow this giant pieces of cereal whole. But I digress. If you also want to add in about 8 ounces of milk to your meal, that's a really good, easy way to get dairy, whether that's skim milk, 1%, 2% whole milk, goat's milk. If you want to get in some other types of milk, listen to last time's podcast, and you have a whole list in there of milk substitutes. All right. So the last thing is we really need to limit certain things. That's going to be less sodium. So for salt and sodium, you want to choose fresh vegetables, meats, poultry, and seafood whenever possible. If you can't get fresh, frozen tends to be a better option. And now I know that a lot of us out there cannot afford fresh vegetables because the better food is for you. Strangely, the more expensive it tends to be in modern society. So go ahead and do what you need to do. But if you're trying to rank them, it would be fresh, then frozen, then canned. If they are canned, check the labels on the different brands and see how much added sodium is in each one. And that's going to help you out a lot. If you're using herbs or spices, use dill, chili powder, paprika, cumin, coriander, cardamom, lemon or lime juice. You can use all of those to add flavor without adding any sodium. Trust me, it's delicious, and it's much easier to do it that way than to try to force yourself to eat plain baked chicken. Spices are our friends. Tips for saturated fats: keep it lean and flavorful. So try grilling it, broiling, roasting, baking. Those methods don't typically add extra fat unless you are covering them in olive oil or another type of oil, depending on the heat that you are cooking these with, and you're not cooking them in oil like you do when you fry stuff. So some simple substitutions can help you stay within your saturated fat limit. Remember, saturated fat is that middle one that we want to limit. It's not as terrible for us as trans fats, which are largely, banned in the US at this point, but it's not as good for us as the polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats. So try using maybe a non-fat yogurt if your yogurt has a bunch of saturated fat in it and it's not the good kind of saturated fats like the ones we find in coconuts. That way, when you make tuna or chicken salad, you can try to put some yogurt in it. I've seen that recommended. That sounds not ideal to me, but that's because I don't like yogurt. I do understand, though, it is a good substitute for mayonnaise, though. So if you're trying to get moisture in there and you like yogurt, maybe try putting some yogurt in there and see how you feel about it. For added sugars, just make sure you cut those calories down by drinking water, unsweetened beverages. You can't really water down a soda, at least not in my experience, but with juice, you can. So if I'm craving some sugar and I don't have any fresh fruit in the house or frozen fruit I can make into a smoothie, then sometimes I'll go ahead and just water down my juice. If I'm going to drink Gatorade, I also water that down because sports drinks are also very high in sugar, just like energy drinks and sodas. So just because it's labeled as being for a sport does not necessarily mean it's healthy if you are sitting there and just chilling. So if you're playing video games or you're not getting up and moving around a lot, then those sports drinks have a lot of added sugars and electrolytes that are meant to replenish your body while you're working out. But if you are not working out, then it can cause more problems. So we want to make sure that we cut those calories by drinking fewer of these things that are bad for us or watering them down significantly. Or you can split sweet treats with families and friends. We're going to go on another quick break, and when we come back, we are going to go over recommendations for physical activity for disabled individuals from the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disabilities.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Talking about ChooseMyPlate.gov and some tips for making small changes in our diets as it relates to the food groups. Now we're going to talk about the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disabilities recommendations for health practices. So the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability was founded in 1999, and it's a public health resource center for promoting healthy lifestyles in people who have disabilities. So they're trying to help people who have disabilities and other chronic health conditions achieve health benefits through promoting increased participation in social, physical activities, fitness and aquatic activities, sports programs, etc. That's what they're there for, and they have an excellent website that I encourage you guys to check out. They have 5 tips in here for fitness and exercise for disability, physical activity, and mental health. So, exercise, as we've gone over before, is important for our health, not just for our physical health, but also our mental health. It's not just associated with weight loss and how we view ourselves, but also about making sure that we are in a good mind frame, because working out is going to promote different neurotransmitters, it's going to promote blood flow, it's going to do a lot for us in regards to our mental health as well. So physical activity has been shown to relieve stress, decrease anxiety and depression, and improve memory as well as sleep. So sometimes if I can't sleep, then I am going to make sure I work out really well the next day just to make sure that I am able to get some more rest. It sounds counterintuitive to work out to sleep more, but think about it like how when you take kids to the pool and they swim a lot and it might only be for 30 minutes or an hour, but don't they sleep better at night? They do, in my experience. It's one of my favorite summertime tricks for making the kids go to bed at a decent time without having to fight it out with them. Now, for physical health being closely linked to mental health, we find that when you take care of one, you're often taking care of the other too. And studies have demonstrated that physical activity can be used to treat mild to moderate depression as equally effective as antidepressant medication, but the reverse can also be true. So if you're experiencing a long-term physical health condition, it could also increase your risk of mental health issues. I'm, again, definitely not saying to replace your medication with working out. That is not at all what I'm saying. This is more of a supplementary type of deal to give your body and your mind the best chance they have at success. If you have a long-term physical health condition and you don't have a mental health issue that accompanies it, working out can help prevent you from developing those along the way. So how do we tackle our physical health while also working on our mental health? There is a top 5 list here on this website to help you guys ward off the extra pounds and help you feel mentally better as well. So the first tip is to choose our activities wisely. We want to make sure that when we're picking an exercise that it's something we're likely to continue, and we are more likely to continue activities that we enjoy. It makes it easier to stick to a routine. So for me, some of my favorites are kayaking or dancing. It depends on the type of disability that you're experiencing in picking one. But there are a lot of different ways that you can modify these exercises as well. And if you like what you're doing, you're more likely to stick to your schedule. Now, if you do start on one of these activities and you decide that you don't like it or it's overwhelming you, go ahead and look for something different. We just want to challenge ourselves, but we don't want to beat ourselves up or be overwhelmed. We're going to be mindful about how much we're starting out with. Remember, if we're not working out at all beforehand, then 5 minutes that's a really big step. That's an important step, and it's okay to start with 5 and to do 5 for a week or several weeks at a time. If you're doing 5 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day 3 times a week is more than we were doing before. So we're measuring our progress against our own selves, not against anybody else's progress. And if you do too much exercise too soon, that can hurt you and be just as detrimental when it comes to forming a habit, as well as to your mental health. Because if we start beating ourselves up about it and not seeing any results really, then that can hurt our feelings really. It's just us hurting our own feelings, and that's not necessary. We want to take these little steps and create our own new normals and establish new habits and patterns so we set ourselves up for success. Their second tip is to overcome the barrier. So there are a lot of barriers to exercise that people tend to face, and that ranges from finding time or knowing what to do if we do have the time. You may also have unique barriers in your own life related to what you are physically or mentally able to do. Now, don't let those barriers conquer you, though. You are going to do the best that you can. That's all that we're trying to do, is just our best. We're working on improving ourselves and giving our brains and our bodies their best chances. So if the barriers are transportation or costs or access or something else more personal, then it's often a matter of finding the right resources, people, or organizations who can help us overcome those obstacles. One of my friends volunteers taking people to their doctor's appointments. So we mentioned earlier that a lot of times if you don't have access to transportation, then people tend to not show up to their doctor's appointments. That's just something that she does in her free time to be kind and give back. Now, there are things like that available to all of us, but a lot of times we don't know where to look. When I was a kid, a big one for us in my county was our Corpening YMCA. I recommend that you guys reach out to organizations like that, or you reach out to a social worker as well. They tend to know the right resources, even if you don't need a social worker full-time per se. Those people are full of so many different ideas, and most of them just want to help people. We tend to think of social workers as just the folks who take away people's kids, but they do so much policy work and counseling. Their lives are so varied, and so are their career trajectories, that they often will have some answers that you need to help you overcome these barriers. So once you make a plan, try to stick to it, even if that's just 3 days a week. And if one option doesn't work, just move on to the next one before you lose your motivation for change. It's more important that we keep working on it than keep doing the exact same thing. Now, accountability is their third one. So I'm really good at talking myself into or out of doing things, and I'm sure a lot of you are as well. So finding another person to be an exercise buddy or even joining a fitness class can help us maintain our accountability and working out consistently. If we join a group exercise class, you can also develop social relationships and meet new people. That sounds a lot like extrovert talk to me, because I'm an introvert, but you don't necessarily have to talk to the other people if you are in a group exercise environment. So don't worry about that if that's not really your thing. Put in your earphones, you'll be fine. And you can also, become part of a larger community if you're into that. I used to take cha-cha classes, and I really enjoyed spending time with those people once or twice a week. But I didn't ever hang out with any of them outside of cha-cha class. Now, that's not because I didn't like them. It's just because I'm very introverted, and I was already having to drive 45 minutes for these classes, so I was not wanting to go up there again throughout the week. But if you are looking to be part of a larger community, exercise groups can be a really good way to do that. And you can also often find others who may have experienced similar barriers to those that you have in your own life. And a lot of times they're going to have tips on how to overcome them. So one of the best ways I think that we learn is by sharing with each other. Regardless of whether you have someone there to hold you accountable or is just there to, hit you up via text and be like, hey, I worked out today. Are you doing your stuff too? Having a buddy can be really helpful on the days when you don't want to get moving. You also need to think about the rewards that you want. They can be very beneficial to keeping you motivated and moving forward. We did another segment on motivation and discipline in a previous episode, so check that out if you're interested. It's important for you to set your goals, though, and that way you know when you've reached them, and that helps you see your progress. So part of setting goals is just about framing your mindset so that you can reward yourself appropriately, so you can see how far you've come, which in and of itself can be an intrinsic reward. When you're setting your goals, try to think outside the box. It doesn't have to be just, I want to lose 5 or 10 pounds. A bigger impact for you might be how it makes you feel. Maybe you want to feel more rested, or like you have more energy, or less stressed, or you're wanting to reduce your insomnia so you get some better sleep. These are excellent goals that we can work on together with a combination of, eating a nutritious diet and exercising. And maybe once you've reached one of those goals and you have more energy, you'll be able to reward yourself by trying something that you weren't sure you would be able to. You never know. You can also look for the resources that you need. The NCHPAD website I've been talking to you guys about today has you covered there. They have resources on physical activity, health promotion, and so much more, particularly for people who have disabilities. That is their focus. So check out their resources, check out their live help button, and go ahead and try living a healthy lifestyle and making positive changes to your physical and mental health. It's not necessarily going to solve all your problems, and I'm not saying it can cure chronic illnesses, but if we set our bodies up for the best chances that they can get, our bodies and our minds will really thank us. I know mine has. A year ago today, I would not have believed I would say words like that. Sitting here, people used to tell me, go work out, go change your diet. And I'm like, I know working out and changing my diet is going to help it, but I don't have the energy for that at this point. For me, that first big step was going to the doctor, which I also put off for like a year before I finally did that. And then I started adjusting my habits. My boss at my old job is a good friend of mine, and he encouraged all of us to start our own personal and professional goals. And we sat down as a team, worked on that together. So having a social component really did help me, but I didn't have to go and seek a new one. I utilized the ones I already had through the help of my boss, who was there to help hold me accountable. He didn't give me a hard time if I didn't meet my goals. He was just there to be encouraging and go, hey, have you drank all that water today you were wanting to? How's your soda step down program going? Did you go outside for at least 10 minutes today? Okay, awesome. Have you done that for the whole week? Great. Now let's go ahead and work it up to your next goal, which is 20 minutes a day or something like that. Having that social accountability and that support, it really helped me to get to where I needed to be today. So I hope you guys found this helpful, and check out NCHPAD.org for some more resources related to disability, working out, and mental health. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.